he makes $7 billion a year. He doesn't need to be doing these. But it's coming from a much higher power. It's coming from God, ultimately.
What would you say if someone is truly stuck in their lives? Would you hypnotize them to become unstuck?
Love this question. Okay. So a principle that I live by and I work with all my clients on, it's actually from a book, so it's not from me. It's called 10x is easier than 2x. Okay, this is actually a book by a doctor. And the idea is that it actually is easier to go for 10x than it is 2.
So tell me about one powerful client breakthrough that you've seen shift from before and after.
So I recently did a hypnosis session with a 25-year-old multimillionaire in his Ferrari in the desert. And I did it for this exact reason, okay? Because he's at a stage in his life where he has more money than he knows what to do with. And he's just stopped. He's a little lost. He doesn't know what to do.
All right, we're here with another episode with DubaiCatch and a special guest with me here, coming all the way from Bali, I would assume.
Actually just came in from Cape Town, actually, South Africa.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, Ibrahim.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. So the first question I usually ask, who is Ibrahim?
That's a good question. So, I mean, there's a more deep spiritual answer to that we could go into, which would take a different tangent, but just to give some context on me, I guess my journey started really 11 years ago when my brother-in-law bought me a ticket to a Tony Robbins seminar. Now, you know who he is. He's a big face in the personal development game. I had no idea who this guy was. Walking in as this, ignorant 19-year-old into this seminar full of 12,000 people in London. I turn up into this room. I'm the youngest guy there. There's booming lights, thousands of people jumping up and down. And I thought, what have I walked into here? Is this some kind of evangelical church? Is this a cult? I felt very uncomfortable going into that room. But when I did and I looked on the stage, this big man came out and said, hey, if you're here right now, either choose to play all out and commit to this or just leave. Don't half-ass it. And so in that moment, this was really a moment that defined me as a person because I decided, okay, against my logical mind, which wanted to retract, I decided to stay. And I played full out, 4 days, 12 hours a day, learning all of these tools and techniques, NLP, like we were talking about before, walking over coals and fires and all this crazy stuff. But I walked out a completely different person. And that day changed me fundamentally because I walked in shy, very insecure, uncertain about myself, not knowing where I wanted to go. I came out confident. I came out a man, I would say. I don't know what happened, but I just kept going back year after year and I started to build myself up. I didn't come from that background. My dad, I'm half Indian, by the way. So on my dad's side, when he came to the UK in the 70s with nothing, essentially had to leave everything behind from where he came from. Just did everything that he could to build me up. He didn't understand what I was doing. Nobody really did around me, but something inside of me said, this is what you should be following. So I started using these tools around NLP and the mind and really understanding psychology to build my own business, which I did, which was a marketing agency. Back then, all I really wanted to do was just prove that I was worth something. I wanted to create freedom. I wanted to take care of my family. I think all of these things that as men we want to do. And so that's what I did. When I left university a few years later, I did an economics degree in the UK. All of my friends went to do these investment banking jobs, which was my path, which is what I should have done. But when the day came when I graduated to start applying for jobs, I couldn't do it. I didn't apply for a single job. And everybody around me told me, you're crazy. What are you doing? You've just invested all this money, 5 years into this degree. But instead of that, I watched all of my friends go and get these nice 6-figure careers. I moved back into my parents' shed and I started working. Every single day I would be visualizing, I would be using all these tools, I'd be jumping up and down on my trampoline, I'd be affirming things. And
it seems like you took the whole thing from Tony Robbins.
Totally. Yeah, totally. It was a massive influence on me back then. But what I didn't realize happened in all of those years, I was actually hypnotized. And that's what changed everything for me, because that's what ultimately changed how I viewed the world, my perception of self and other people. And so that's really how the journey started for me.
Interesting. I actually myself have done that Tony Robbins event back in the United States.
UPW or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How was that for you?
It was a very interesting event, honestly. To walk on a coal, well, you would never do that in any other event for sure. But the way he tried to hypnotize you in a way to convince you that you can do this, convince a lot of people there. You're talking about 10,000 people that attend those events and 10,000 people that literally walk on the coal that is burning hot. I just can't imagine how even the people that work with him, they volunteer their time for 12 hours to 14 hours a day.
I did that, by the way. A
Yes.
few years later, I actually became one of those volunteers. So I actually was on
But
the
that is
outside
an
of it.
interesting thing. How can a man with such influence be able to convince numerous amount of people from different backgrounds, different types of hierarchy of wealth, different types of like income sources, to countries, to do the things that he wants to do? Whether it's that changing the people's perspective or changing the world, but he convinced people to join him alongside that journey.
It's kind of like how we were talking off camera about what built this amazing city of Dubai. It was built on a foundation of giving, of providing for others. And that's very much the same with somebody like him. He didn't need to do these seminars after a certain point. He had more than he needed for himself. You know, he makes $7 billion a year. He doesn't need to be doing these. But it's coming from a much higher power. It's coming from God ultimately, right? And it's growth and contribution. These are the two fundamental drivers that you need in order to really go further. And I think as people, we're not really trying to follow a person. We want to follow a cause or some kind of mission or perhaps a religion, right? Something greater than ourselves that we can get behind. And I think when we can get that as humans, we come together and it brings out the best side of us. You know, going to that seminar and volunteering, by the way, even to volunteer was a whole process. You couldn't just volunteer. It was a strenuous process to even be able to give, because they had such high standards for that. So I think when it's coming from that intention, people feel that it's real, that it's coming from the right place. And then in that space, that's when real change can happen.
So let's get back to that specific time of your era where you were actually handling social media agency.
Sure.
But then you started to decide that you want to go and become a hypnotist.
Yeah.
Was there a certain personal insecurity that you had to deal with?
For sure. I mean, there wasn't just one, there were many. I would say the biggest one was ultimately not feeling good enough in myself, which is actually the number one insecurity most of humans have. And so everything I was doing was, without me knowing, driven by an insecurity. I wanted to be perceived in a certain way. Maybe I need to dress a certain way, or have my goal was always to have this penthouse apartment in London. I had it on my vision board, which I got. I got it. But the funny, when I moved out from my parents' shed to that penthouse and they dropped me off and I was surrounded by brown boxes, I remember going onto the balcony and looking over the smoky London skyline. And I thought, okay, I guess this is it. I've made it. Like, the vision board became the reality. But inside of me, I felt this deep unrest, this lack inside of me. And that moment showed me that no matter how many external things we have, this time, location, and financial freedom that everybody wants, that doesn't necessarily create internal freedom. And to me, internal freedom is a feeling of peace. It's a feeling of security. It's a feeling of you can just sit still and just feel good and feel content. I believe you can only really find that through God now, but that was essentially the driver for everything, that insecurity. And so that was really the biggest battle, I would say, back then, was overcoming that. And it still is to this day. We're humans, right? We have these natural tendencies. None of us are perfect. I'm certainly not. But I think the more that I was able to, actually, I'll tell you one more quick story. We were talking about Iman before this. So I became one of the top students in Iman's course in those agency days. And I remember I was visualizing him reaching out to me to say, hey, let's do a student interview. Because that was the clout back then, right? You go on his channel and it was that was a sign of success, almost like a ClickFunnels award in the online space. And that happened. He reached out to me. And the funny thing was, he said, yeah, we'll meet in 2 weeks. Every night I was so nervous before meeting him. And when it finally happened, I did the interview. It went good, although I was sweating the whole time. But after, as I sat there in my fancy Herman Miller chair, I remember just feeling if I wasn't here tomorrow, would anyone really care? Would it really matter? And the honest answer back then was not really. And the reason why is because everything I was doing was actually driven by self unknowingly. And I wasn't really giving truly. And so that moment, although it was a sobering moment, was another turning point because I started changing the way I operate. Instead of doing everything for what I can get, looking at what can I give. And as soon as I switched to what can I give, things started to change. Not only did I feel better personally, but everything else started to flourish around me. I forget what the original question was now, but
coming to this, now that you're asking, don't you think a person usually has to first fill the things with himself? Basically be able to fill the gaps that he has in his life, improve himself, find that financial freedom. So then he can start using whatever resources that he has and give it to others.
I don't think he has to. You know, I remember many years ago, so my dad, although he's half Indian, was born in Africa. So actually in Uganda is where they grew up. I went back there and I did some charity work out there and I was building playgrounds for schools in 2016. And this one day, this child came up to me and he offered me some maize and he said, "Hey, I would like to give you this gift." And now we were told if somebody from the local village gives you a gift, you have to accept it. It's very disrespectful not to. And this kid needed it, you know, and I thanked him and I asked him, "How are you doing? How's your day going?" He said, "I'm so happy. I'm so grateful you're here. I'm quite hungry today. You know, I don't think we'll have enough food to eat, but aside from that, I'm happy." And this kid is giving me the only food, literally the only food that he had. And that again just made me realize, what are we doing all of this for? You know, all of these, and I nearly actually stayed to give more to this. And I could have done that. But to your point about what you just said about essentially building yourself up and filling up your own cup first, I decided to go and pursue business because I knew that, at least for me, it felt like I would be able to give more through that. So I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way. Everybody has their own choice. For me, I believe I can make more impact through this route.
So how did you go about becoming a hypnotist?
Yeah, so it wasn't until many years later I even knew I was hypnotized. So my whole life changed, but I didn't know why. And this actually happens to a lot of people. So my conception of a hypnotist was a dude on a stage who looks like a magician, or he's wearing some baggy trousers or something, dressed in dark. And, you know, he's making you quack like a duck or just do something silly. That was what my view was. And I think that's a general common perception of hypnotism, right? It's almost like a magician, like doing a card trick or something. So it was never really something I thought about at all. It was just, it's maybe just for fun or something like that.
So what is it?
What is it?
What is being a hypnotist or being hypnotized?
So hypnosis is simply just a brainwave state. If you want the science behind it. So essentially we have different brainwave states that we operate in. Right now, you and I are mostly in what's called beta. So we're alert, we're listening to each other. This is the state that we're in most of the time as adults. Theta is a different brainwave state where you feel more relaxed. So it's like the state when you woke up this morning and it was, you just woken up and you're in between awake and asleep. You're conscious, but you're very, very relaxed. Or when you were brushing your teeth, or when you're in the shower, or when you were driving and you kind of go into that, you know, almost zone out a little bit and you just relax. That is the state of hypnosis. So we go into this all of the time, every single day. So can you be hypnotized? Yes, because you go into it all of the time naturally. As a child, you're primarily in this state, particularly between 0 to 8 years old. You probably hear all the time about how that's so important for children at that stage of their life. It's because they're in hypnosis. So if you imagine, you know, if I'm playing with my 5-year-old nephew and we're slaying dragons together, you know, just make believe. And to him, he's really there. That's what he's experiencing. And that's the beauty of it, because he believes that. Or if I ask him, what do you want to be? He wants to be the most famous YouTuber in the world, or he wants to be the president. He has no limiting beliefs or fear around that because they haven't been instilled in him. It's not until later, and then those fears and those limiting beliefs and doubts get instilled unknowingly, whether it's from parents, you know, governments, maybe from media, depending on what that child is exposed to. So that is what hypnosis is. So it's, instead of it happening unconsciously, all I'm doing is, whether I'm working with an entrepreneur or an athlete, is I'm helping them get back into that natural state so that they can change.
Interesting. And so, what would you say if someone is truly stuck in their lives? Would you hypnotize them to become unstuck?
So the first question is why? Why are you stuck? How did you get to this point? Because nothing happens by chance.
They feel lost.
So that's a lot of people that I work with, whether they're just starting out or they might be already worth tens of millions of dollars and they feel stuck. The success has actually nothing to do with that point in life. Oftentimes, when you're stuck, one of the best things you can do is shift the attention off of yourself. Okay, I'll give you an example by this. So the number one fear in the world is public speaking. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's just talking, right? This is public speaking right now, what you and I are doing. And the reason why that's the number one fear is because we're so focused on how am I being perceived? Am I going to make a mistake? How will I be judged? What if I fail? All of these fears come up, right? Because we're obsessed with ourselves unknowingly. So if you're stuck, I would say the first thing you can do is just take that attention off yourself. Put it on something or someone else, because you get what you focus on. I had a guy yesterday who just wanted to work with me, and he had severe anxiety to the point where he would get vertigo and he would go so dizzy that he would almost pass out. And this was his whole life.
Is this from speaking?
This was just in life, in all the time,
Wow.
like since he was 2 years old, due to some events that happened. And he tried everything. He tried all the kinds of processes you could imagine, but all of those processes were just focusing on the problem or him being stuck in that pattern or that anxiety. Whereas when I asked him, well, how do you want to feel? He had no idea. How do you want your life to look? I have no idea. I just want to not feel anxiety. I just want to not feel stuck. Because whatever you focus on is what you get. And so if you can change that focus, everything immediately changes, because we just wherever we take our attention, that's what we get more of. So that's the first thing, changing that focus. And then also looking at how can you take it off yourself onto something else, something that you want, helping somebody else. That will immediately change everything.
Do you think the influence of the environment that you surround yourself with, the people that you surround yourself with, really influences the way that you think and the way that you are going to behave?
So the equation that I live by is, I always say your internal state equals your external reality, okay? The three things that affect your internal state are your thoughts in the mind, your emotions in the body, and your environment, which is the third one, which is what you just referred to. So the two things that mainly go into the environment are your physically where you are, so right now we're in Dubai, and then who you surround yourself with by. Absolutely. This is one of the easiest hacks, so to speak, because what happens, right? If you're around people who are now, instead of pulling you back to an old version of yourself, maybe it's friends who perhaps don't have the certain best habits from your hometown, or maybe they don't have the same vision as you. The easiest thing you can do is just move. Go and surround yourself with people who are what you want to be like. But why does that work? And if I ask you this question, if you were surrounded by 5 multimillionaires all day, do you think you would be more likely to become one?
I always said, like, similar to what Tony Robbins has said, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with.
Exactly.
I believe he said that as well,
Yeah.
within UPW.
Exactly.
And that quote in itself, it stayed with me for the rest of my life. I mean, I've done the Tony Robbins event back in 7 years ago, you're talking about. And to this day, I can't, say more than 100% true that this is the exact quote that everyone should follow. That you are the average of the people that you surround yourself with.
Yes. But why is that the case?
Why is that the case? Well, I mean, it's simple. We are human beings. We get to see what people do, and we want to do the same thing that they do. So it's a very similar thing. And when you start seeing that your friends truly believe in themselves to be able to accomplish those things, it becomes very easy that you'll grab the same energy, the same type of belief. It'll just come to you.
So it's the belief, which
Mhm.
you just perfectly identified. And the belief is everything. And this is why I use hypnosis, because that's what you're doing, is you're changing what even is a belief? Well, a belief is just a thought that's been repeated enough times in your head that you now believe it. So for example, before we started, you were talking about your dad and the great things that he instilled in you. And you jokingly said he hypnotized you, right? But he did, unknowingly, to now have those thoughts and those beliefs, which made you take actions to be where you are now. So the question is, what are you believing that isn't serving you, right? Maybe that I'm not good enough. Maybe, and these are some common ones for people. If I do that, maybe I'll fail. Or if I fail, then how will people perceive me? And it's actually that fear of other people's judgment. Because if you fail in silence, it's not so big of a deal. But if you fail in front of 10,000 people, suddenly that feels heavier. So these are the kinds of beliefs that we can change. And as soon as you change them, everything else changes.
Do you think people can shift their mind from, for example, having a 10K a month to maybe having 100K a month in their business?
Yeah, that's what I do. That's exactly what I do with clients. Or even 100K to $1 million a month, or 2 million or 10 million a month.
So what's stopping people from believing they can achieve 100K instead of a 10K from your perspective?
Just themselves, just their own mind.
Really?
They don't believe that they can do it. And so because they don't actually believe that they can do it, they don't take the actions. Every single person here, if they were to think about what's their main goal right now, financially or otherwise, it doesn't really matter. They'll know what that goal is. They'll know what they want, right? But then if I ask you, what's stopping you from being there, or even what should you do to get there? They'll say the actions. I should do X, Y, and Z. So they know what they should do. So they know what they should do, but for some reason, they're just not doing it. It's like they've got one foot on the gas, one on the brake at the same time, right? They want it, but something's stopping them. That something stopping them is in the subconscious mind, okay? So consciously, we know what we want to do, but that's less than 1% of our mind. The subconscious mind is 99+%. So if they're not working together, that's why it feels like you're having these ups and downs, maybe in your health journey or your business journey. It's simply because you have a subconscious belief that's stopping you. So as soon as you change that, which by the way is immediate, change does not happen over time. It happens in a moment. So once you get to that moment, everything else changes.
What about the knowledge of not knowing what to do?
Then you learn, right? The beautiful thing about the world we live in now is we have ChatGPT, we have YouTube. Everything is pretty much out there for free. This was different, by the way. Maybe even when we're both the same age. So when we were growing up, there was a knowledge gap. There was this, people didn't know. I had to take a Facebook ads course when I was like 18, which was $2,000, put me in debt to learn how to run a Facebook ad. Now, if you want to learn how to run a Facebook ad, you go on YouTube, it's all there for free. So it's a different world that we're living in right now. Everybody has access to pretty similar amount, or at least enough information to get to where they want to go. So that's why I say the only thing now for people that's stopping them is their own mind. And that's a good thing, because that's something that they have control over to change.
I think the most powerful tool that you have right now in your life is to ask powerful questions. Because with the right questions, you get the right answers. Now that you have ChatGPT, which is a tool, it will not function by itself. But if you ask the right questions and you prompt it right, it will give you the answers that you're looking for. Whether it's something regarding your health, whether it's regarding to your wealth, or even your relationships. It's all about the questions that come from your mind, which ChatGPT can never bring from your own mind, because you know yourself and you know exactly what you want. I think that's very powerful.
The question for somebody who's stuck, and just to really help that person who's stuck, the question I always ask myself when I'm in a situation that I don't want to be in is, why is this the best possible thing that could have happened? And you might ask that question through gritted teeth initially. You might not want to ask that question, but when you ask it, your mind will immediately find answers. Oh, because I'm learning this, it's led me here. I've maybe changed to a better direction. It's made me stronger. It's made me more resilient. There's a million answers to that question. So I love what you just said there. Completely agree.
So let's give an example. I'm the person who has a limiting belief. How do I rewire my brain from doubting itself?
What's the limiting belief?
I have a limiting belief maybe that I might not be able to achieve $100 million in my lifetime.
It's super interesting that you said that, because a guy who just joined up with me yesterday, he's a oil and gas guy here in Dubai. He wants to get into private equity, and the goal he wants is $100 million, exactly net worth. And he said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's just, for some reason, that's my goal, but I have no idea how. I said, perfect. That's the perfect approach to have, because the how you cannot know yet from your current self. So your current self cannot possibly get to $100 million. You have to become the $100 million person first, right? But what does that actually look like? Well, you first have to start a simple question you can ask is, how would that version of myself act? Would they be scared about, I'm sure at some point being a TV presenter to you was completely foreign. I'm sure it didn't come natural to you.
Yeah.
You weren't born that way, right? I'm sure it was very scary at the time. It required courage for you to do that initially. Now it feels normal. Now it probably feels very comfortable and natural to you.
To the point that people would think that you have been doing this your whole life.
Exactly. And when I tell people I used to be very shy, insecure, my dad would take me to go and get fish and chips on a Friday because, UK. I couldn't even go in and pay the guy the money for the fish and chips because I was so scared, right? So I constructed this version of myself simply by, first of all, changing my thoughts and beliefs. So in terms of how do you overcome those limiting beliefs? Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Is that true? So let's say I don't feel like I'm good enough. Let's say I have a fear of X happening. Is that actually true? Just logically, is that true?
I actually have fear of it not happening,
Yes.
more so than it happening. My main concern is the knowledge of not knowing what to do in order to reach that goal.
The knowledge of not knowing what to do.
Yes.
Explain that to me.
And in a short period of time, your life is not that expansive where you can live 200 years until you figure it out. In the short period of time, I'm 30 years old, and let's say I want to achieve $100 million when I am 45 years old in 15 years' time. How can I reduce that time span where I can achieve so much in such little time?
I love this question. Okay. So a principle that I live by and I work with all my clients on, it's actually from a book, so it's not from me. It's called 10x is easier than 2x. Okay, this is actually a book by a doctor. And the idea is that it actually is easier to go for 10x than it is 2. Now, how does that make any sense whatsoever? Well, let's say your goal was to go from $1 million to $2 million. Okay, well, you'd say, okay, well, let's just say content and podcasting is your source of growing right now. We'd say, okay, well, I'll do 2 podcasts a week instead of 1. I'll do more content. I'll hire this team member, and you'll do these things to grow. It's linear growth, okay? And most people would say, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good plan, and people would agree with that, and you'd go and do it. The problem with that is it's inherently limited by your input. You can only do so much in a day.
How much you can do in a day?
Exactly. So then the reason why you want to think from that 10x goal, so let's say it's $100 million for you. Okay, so now you thinking from that $100 million self, you now have to ask completely different questions because you cannot simply do these same activities. It's just not going to get you there in the time, right? I'll give you an example of how I did this in my life, just to ground this a little bit. When I just came from South Africa. I was on a safari with my girlfriend for Valentine's Day. We're driving through, there's lions around us, there's giraffes grazing, and I go into a state of hypnosis. I'm just zoned out, and I'm just daydreaming completely. And a random thought popped into my mind. I want to work with UFC fighters. I always loved UFC. I did a lot of martial arts growing up. Childhood dream of mine. Now, what would a 2x version of that be? Okay, well, let me go to a local gym. Let me find a fighter. Maybe I start helping him. Maybe he then does his first fight. He gets some results, and I work my way up to eventually being in the UFC. Then maybe after a few years, I'll start working with champions. Most people would say, yeah, it makes sense. What did I do? I said, I work with the best UFC fighters in the world. I immediately just decided that's the case. Okay. I decided it fully. As soon as I get home, a friend of mine came to visit and he said, what's new? And I said, I'm working with UFC fighters. Now, you might say that's delusional to say that, but the fear that would have stopped me from doing that is also delusional because fear isn't real. Okay. So if you're going to be delusional, why not be delusional about the things that you actually want to happen? And here's what's interesting. As soon as I said that to him, he said, oh, I have a friend called Malcolm who's actually very close and good friends with Conor McGregor. Now I'm friends with this Malcolm guy. I'm now connected with BKFC, which is Conor McGregor's fighting organization. And I'm very close to working with him and those top fighters. So this is an example of a 10x action because by doing that, I've essentially skipped maybe the 5 years that it would have taken me to slowly work my way up by one decision, by thinking from the goal instead of just from my current self. And in that process, I now get stretched. I grow much faster because I have to grow faster. And so that is essentially the how of how you 10x things or just get to where you want to go a heck of a lot faster.
So what would you think is like that one belief that holds back 99% of entrepreneurs from succeeding on their goal right now?
Fear of not being good enough. That's ultimately where it all stems from. And that can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people, but that is the fear. And if we're not, and this is Tony Robbins said this best, if that fear of not being good enough is ultimately a fear of not being loved. Everything we do is for ultimately to feel love. We act so well so we can get our parents' approval, so our father can say we're proud, which is a beautiful thing, but it's also to receive love from them. So the best thing that we can do is, first of all, start giving ourselves that validation, that love, or that, because then we don't need it from other people. And as soon as we don't need something, it comes in abundance. As soon as you can embody that $100 million version of yourself, but equally not need it to happen, it will come so much faster. And that's the practice.
That is a very interesting thing you just said. Sometimes when you pursue something so much, it might tend to go further away from you. Whether that's love, whether that's wealth, or whether that's a certain different type of goal. I feel like you should work towards that goal, but not be in a way that it's just taking over your mind that you have to do this, you have to go there. But more so like, I'm going to work in what I can do now. And then let that thing that I'm working in guide me through that goal.
Yes. Perfectly said. If you put all of that energy into the doing of it, into the process, that's when things feel like they're in flow. That's when you don't feel like you're actually working. You are working. Maybe you're working more than you've ever worked, but it doesn't feel that way because you just love the process. And when you fall in love with that, the goal is just a natural byproduct.
Very true. So if someone has like 15 minutes a day to work on themselves, what would you recommend?
The way you start your day is the way your day typically goes. So if you're starting your day looking at your phone, responding to emails,
that's what I do, honestly.
And it's easy to do because why? Because you want to start getting on top of things. You have certain expectations you have met from team, from people, from clients, all these kinds of things. But you cannot truly serve those people to the best of your ability if you don't first serve yourself. Like you said at the beginning, filling up your own cup. So the best thing you can do is just give yourself some time in the morning. For me, that's self-hypnosis, but for somebody else, that might be meditation. It might be walking on the beach. It might be prayer. Whatever that is for that person, just giving yourself that time first is the most important thing, because it's also when you're in the theta brainwave state. You've just woken up, you're essentially, it's when your mind is most reprogrammable. So when you're in that state, if you're having inputs come in that are not intentional, you're getting your whole brain is getting rewired for things that you do not want, for fear, for other people's fears, concerns, problems. If you run a business, it's putting out fires half the time, right? So take that time for yourself to be intentional with what you do. Let's say you're somebody who's ambitious listening to this. Take that time to really meditate on what you want, that overall vision, zoom out. Because then that person you bring back who then faces the rest of the day is going to be the version of yourself that you want to, and the way you want to represent yourself.
So let's talk about your hypnosis sessions that you usually conduct. I've seen you like literally you hold someone's head, you clap, you do the sound, you clip it, and there will be an hypnosis stage, and then they will start to shift their belief. Can you tell us a little bit more about how does this whole process work?
So that is basically to overcome the conscious mind. Or the logical mind, right? Because right now we're using our logical mind to talk, which is great, but this isn't where the mind can be rewired. We have to get past that. So those things that you see, there's different ways to get into hypnosis. There's pattern interrupts, there's shock inductions. If I do something that looks a bit crazy, if this is for marketing, right? Marketers use this stuff. It's to actually get people listening, to get people into essentially a trance. So we use these there's a million different techniques. Storytelling is actually a hypnotic technique if you do it properly. So there's all these different techniques, but ultimately what we're doing is just getting into a very relaxed state. So you're in control the whole time, at least with the way I do it. So you're conscious, you're aware, but you're just very relaxed. It's actually a very nice feeling. And once you're in that state, now this is where, once we've identified what the limiting beliefs or fears are, you literally remove them. So let's say you had a fear of maybe it's a lack of knowledge or success or whatever that is, you can quite literally remove those things, because once they're removed, just like you would remove a program from a computer, it's no longer in the operating system. So we remove them. And then once you imagine if you had no fear in terms of your goals, how much quicker and easier do you think you'd get towards those goals? Well, how much different do you think those decisions would be if you didn't have those fears holding you back? Because fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. It's not actually real. Fear is not a truth. It's not something that's actually real. And think about it. Every time you fear something, if that thing actually happens, it's not even as bad as just the idea of the fear in the first place.
So what is if it's the fear of being broke or the fear of losing financial means of surviving if you invest in a business and then you lose all your money in business?
Yeah, it could happen. But does it actually happen? Like, think about how many times that fear's gone around your head. How many times has that happened versus you thinking it could happen? For most people, it's either never actually happened, or maybe something did happen once. Sure, that's an experience. I'm not discounting that. But it is just fear. And if you think about it like this, what is the state that's going to help you to get out of that? Is it a fear state? No. Nothing good comes from being in fear. Because when you're in fear, that's when you're controllable. That's when you're a limited self. That fearful version of self cannot possibly achieve those goals. So that's, first of all, getting out of that state is the key.
So tell me about one powerful client breakthrough that you've seen shift from before and after.
Yeah, I mean, so many, man. I think of
maybe someone entrepreneur who's
an
a business.
entrepreneur. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, even just I could give so many examples. I'll give one recently just from a DM that I got. I actually, funnily enough, went on a guy's podcast in Cape Town, and he runs an online business. It's a coaching business, and for him, he was doing pretty well in his business, but he had a fear of getting to his goal was 100K per month with his business, and he knew all the systems, he knew all the processes and stuff like that. But once we got to the bottom of it, really, he just lacked a little bit of self-belief and confidence that he was worthy of that 100K per month. He had some negative attachments to money because he came from a very poor background in Africa where this was not the norm. So all of that programming was actually keeping him not going to that next level. So actually live on the podcast, we actually did the hypnosis. He just messaged me. He's already on track to hit that 100K per month just a few weeks later, right? This is the only thing that changed was his belief and confidence. That was it. I gave him a few pieces of advice. That was it. So this is just like the norm, to be honest.
He lived in Cape Town?
He lives in Johannesburg, so South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's close to Cape Town.
I think there's another person who's in the coaching business, William Brown.
Yeah, he's someone I work with as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm always curious to meet him as well.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Actually, he'd be a great guest for your podcast.
For sure. How did he change his limited belief for someone who's successful as he is?
Yeah, for sure. So he already made, tons of money and had a successful career. He actually had a belief that he didn't want to go above 500K per month in his business because that meant more stress, more headache, etc. He also had I won't say the specifics because some of it's personal to him, but he had some health goals to look better and have a better body and stuff like that. And there was certain habits that were stopping him from doing that. We changed the habits in one session. Now you can just look at photos of him now compared to a couple months ago. The healthiest he's ever been. He's also now making by far the most money he's ever made after that one session. Now, I'm not going to say that's all me at all. He's a hardworking, already successful person, but it was just these subtle beliefs that were shifted. And here's what I found is interesting. The most successful people I work with, I'm talking like 8-9-figure guys, are interestingly the most open-minded. And I thought it would have been the other way. I thought they would have been the most skeptical. But I think the reason why is because the things that they've done to get there are different. Right? They've tried all this different stuff because they'll do anything to get an edge. And it's not just them. Guys like even Andrew Tate, Iman, Mike Tyson, Tiger Woods, all these guys actually use hypnotists. They just don't publicly talk about it because it's, in a way, it's their edge, right? It's their secret superpower. It's also still a little bit taboo, right? The way people think about it. But all these guys are actually doing it behind the scenes. And now I know this because I hypnotize guys from Andrew Tate's courses and all these guys' communities. So that's how I know about this stuff now because I work with their clients. So It's just, I forget the question again, bro. I'll let you bounce back in.
It's just more so about the powerful client breakthrough we're talking
Breakthroughs,
about.
yeah. So yeah, Wilson, I'll you know what? I don't want to give a different example who's not an entrepreneur. My own mother. I actually did a session with my own mother recently, 4 weeks ago. She's a 60-year-old woman. Since 15 years old, she smoked cigarettes every single day. 10, 20 cigarettes every single day since she was
20 cigarettes.
a day since 15. So 45 years, okay? She tried everything to quit. She was actually already getting a bit healthier and she really wanted to change her life, but this one habit she could not quit. We did one session, and in this session, this was very personal to me because obviously it's my own mother. And what I realized is I had this fear of her dying early. And because I had this fear, it actually stopped me from getting closer to her because I felt that pain more. And so once we unlocked that, ultimately, she was able to feel that love in herself because we were able to have that open, honest communication in the hypnosis session. She threw away her cigarettes. She flew back to the UK. It's been a month. She hasn't smoked after 45 years. And to me, I'm honestly even more proud of that because that is truly life-changing, because it's not just about quitting the cigarettes or changing the habit or whatever. It's showing that you can change. Because if you can do it in one area of your life immediately, suddenly now your mind goes, what else can I do? I did this, what else can I do? And that's the power of it. That is the gift that I want everybody to be able to get, to realize the power of our own minds. Because this is all inside of us. We all have this ability. It's free. You can do this yourself. And the only thing stopping people is just the belief that they can't.
Do you feel that one session is enough to change their perspective of life or changing their limiting belief forever?
Yes.
So all is that I need from you, Ibrahim Turner, is one session of hypnosis. It will change my trajectory of life.
Yeah. Now, yes, and I do work with clients for periods of time as well, because you can change everything in that one session. But if you then go back to your life, you think the same way, you act the same way, you hang around the same people, you don't make the changes, eventually you'll program yourself to go back into that old version, right? Now, a lot of that can happen. So what I also do is there's other things that we'll do to anchor that in and make it stay for life. But absolutely, it changes in one session oftentimes, particularly when it's making a change like that or quitting a habit. There's a before and there's an after 45 minutes later. When it comes to the business success stuff, I typically work with people for longer periods of time, because what will happen is you'll make that change and then there'll be other things that will come up along that journey. There'll also be other things that you want to work on and evolve from. So we kind of take it step by step. But yeah, the change happens in a moment. It doesn't happen over time. There is a single moment in your mind when it changes, and we just get to that moment.
Wonderful. Since we're here in Dubai, let's talk about that. How do you believe Dubai helps people grow professionally and personally, from your perspective?
I guess I can only speak about my own experience. This is the fourth time I've been here, and I've decided to base myself here now for a good part of the year. And the reason I chose that, after visiting a lot of countries, is because this city is built, I mean, it was sand 50, 60 years ago. None of this existed. And so that sheer belief and mindset that this was built on perfectly explains what it is like being here. People come here to do something great, to be the best version of themselves, to give, to help people, to build amazing things that haven't been done before. So for me, the reason I chose to be here is because my visions are vast, and this city creates a space for that, because it has so many other people who have that same vision and mindset. And what I found is the most successful people typically actually want to help each other the most. It's really interesting. And so that, I think, is one of the best things about Dubai. Of course, all the normal things about how safe it is, how clean it is, all of that stuff. Of course, I'm sure people have talked about that many times, so I won't go into that. That's a given. But for me, it's that main thing around the mindset.
It's interesting now that you bring this perspective, because thinking about everything that Dubai has achieved today, it started with someone, a visionary leader, the Dubai ruler, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, who seen that there was no limiting belief on what could be achieved right here in the city. If they told him that they couldn't build the tallest tower, he did it. If they told him that they couldn't build an island, he did it. And if they told him that they're going to build the biggest shopping mall, the biggest inspirational things that you can imagine right here in the city, he has done it. Even when there was numerous consultants from the highest and the biggest companies coming to consult the other way to say that this desert place can be more than what it was. Look at the city right now, where everyone wants to join it. Everyone wants to come here to be just as ambitious and inspired by the leader that we have here today. They're inspired, and therefore the community is inspired. Therefore, the whole city becomes such of that aura, that energy of becoming better version of yourself, something more than you will ever become, maybe in your own home country.
I couldn't agree more. And for you, you were born here?
Yes, I was born here.
So I'm curious. So I know you spent some time in the US as well, but how has that been for you, being born here and seeing it evolve?
I mean, it's never wrong to travel overseas to different countries and learn the good things from there. Because you can never know what's truly a blessing or something that you feel like is considered amazing things to have unless you go outside to the world and see what they have. So when I went to the United States, when I went to Australia, when I went to numerous other countries, I learned something from each country. And it opens your mind to something different. Like you said, the beliefs or the limiting beliefs is because you haven't been exposed to what the possibilities can come. And when we talked about environment, we talked about the people. If I didn't know that there's a person who can achieve 100 billion, I will never believe that the 100 billion would be possible. But because I see so many people are able to do that, they be very young, they might be in their early 30s or even their 20s for some people. You feel like it's possible. Why should I have to wait until I'm 60 years old to achieve that? Maybe I can achieve it just when I'm young, prime, ready to conquer the world and see what the world has to offer.
And what that does is it makes you feel comfortable. It makes that feel normal. It makes it feel achievable, natural. And so it brings something that was far out of reach to now something that, yeah, I can do that. Right. And that's the key. That is what creates true confidence. You're confident when you're comfortable. That is really when you feel confident, right? So whether it's a monetary goal, whether it's I'm working with a tennis player who's uncomfortable on the court, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just feeling comfortable in that situation.
Mhm.
And so the more you can normalize that thing that you want and take it off the pedestal, the easier it will be to attain.
What would you say to someone who's afraid to take the leap and move here to somewhere as amazing as city of Dubai is?
There's always, whenever you're going to go through a big life change, there's always a moment where you feel fear. It doesn't feel comfortable in that moment. The thing that's required is some courage and some faith. And this is unavoidable. This is everybody who watches this or watches you or the guests you have on, they all had to take that leap at some point in their life. And that is, in most cases, the only difference between someone who's not taken that leap or moved here versus somebody who did. There was just a moment in time where they said, okay, I want to do this. I feel fear, but I'm going to have the courage to do it anyway. And that is all it is. And on the other side of that courageous action, everything awakes. And the more you do that, the more your self-belief grows, the more everything that you want becomes possible.
Do you think someone can achieve their dreams and still be miserable?
So I recently did a hypnosis session with a 25-year-old multimillionaire in his Ferrari in the desert. And I did it for this exact reason, okay? Because he's at a stage in his life where he has more money than he knows what to do with. And he's just stopped. He's a little lost. He doesn't know what to do. So can you? Absolutely. Because that was the whole point of us creating that video. And the reason why is because when you don't feel like you're growing in life, personally or professionally, you don't feel fulfilled. And that is honestly when you feel miserable. It's when you're not actually growing. So the key is to be able to find ways that you can grow, whether you're at the beginning of your journey, whether you're already a billionaire, because there's plenty of billionaires who also feel miserable because they don't feel like they have that growth that's happening. To find a way to grow. And that could be through giving, that could be through learning a new hobby and, learning paddle, right? Hopefully you don't break your foot like me. But you can. And there's that funny saying, like, I'd rather cry in my Ferrari. And we made a joke about that. And sure, look, of course, is it better to have all that stuff? Absolutely. I'm going to take that every time. I'm ultimately a capitalist. We're all capitalists here. But money only solves money problems. It doesn't solve the internal things that we want. And so you don't have to wait until you get to that stage to then have this quarter life crisis. Now, it used to be midlife crisis. Now, because we grow so fast, we're now quarter life crises at 25. But you don't have to wait. You can grow in all areas alongside your ambition, alongside your business or your career.
What is that one brutal truth about success that most people don't even talk about?
Everything is your fault. So if you're where you want to be right now in your life and you're happy, still growing, but you're happy, great. That's your fault. You created that. If you're not where you want to be and you're unhappy and you're miserable and you're sad, guess what? That's also your fault.
You are your own responsibility.
Exactly. I say it like that intentionally because if you do not choose to take responsibility for that, you are making yourself a victim. And when you are a victim, you cannot change your life. I refuse to view anybody as a victim, no matter what the circumstances. I have guy messaged me today. He's just had gone through a brutal divorce. His wife took the child and he's miserable. But I'm not sorry for him because that won't help him. It's still his responsibility. And he has to see it that way in order to change, as we all do. That is the most empowering belief, I believe, that will help you to gain more success.
What is that something that you strongly believe that most people disagree with?
That most people disagree with.
Yes.
A lot of people say confidence comes from competence. That's generally what most people agree with. I disagree. I believe it can come from competence, but actually, in my experience, if we're talking about how do we want to get to our goals much faster, confidence comes first. It's a decision. And confidence can be anything. I'm just using it as an example here. If you decide to act a certain way, to be a certain way, guess what? You will actually feel that way. You will actually act that way. People will perceive you that way. And that's how you'll get to where you want to go faster. So many people wait. Once I get to this point, then I'll be happy. Then I'll have the confidence. Then I'll do this for my family. Then I'll start giving to charity once I have this amount of money. No, you do it now. You start now because that is the version of yourself that will create more of that.
Interesting advice. And if something like terrible that happened where everything that you have right now got stripped from you, no followers, no business, what would you do to start all over again?
So this sort of happened.
Would you hypnotize yourself to shift that belief in that you can do it again?
I mean, that's what I would do right now. But obviously, to give something that could be helpful for people, in 2021, this was during lockdown, I left London. That penthouse apartment I mentioned, I left it. I flew to Greece. I wanted to just get out because Greece wasn't in a lockdown. On that 4-hour flight, Greece went into lockdown much more severely than London. I couldn't leave the Airbnb I was staying at. So one day I was sitting on the rooftop of this Airbnb. The sun was setting, I had a glass of wine, and I was looking over the Acropolis, and everything was picture perfect, exactly as I would have wanted it to be in my mind. But internally, I had so much fear and anxiety that it would all come crashing down. And I had all this fear inside of me, particularly everything exacerbated by COVID in those times. And the interesting thing was I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to lose it all. I'm going to lose it all. And it was this loop in my mind I couldn't get out of. The next day when I opened my laptop, cancellation. In 48 hours, I lost half of all of my clients for my company.
Cancellation for what?
For my agency that I was running. So half of my clients just cancelled. The interesting thing was I started hysterically laughing. And my partner at the time was like, "Oh, what's happening?" And I was like, "Oh, I just lost half of my clients." And she thought I was going mad. And the reason why I was laughing is because that fear that I thought I would feel from it happening was so much worse in my mind than it actually happening. In fact, I actually felt relief when it happened. And that taught me probably the most valuable lesson I've ever been given, which is that we don't just manifest what we want, we manifest what we think and whatever is going in our mind. And so that was what was going in my mind. Therefore, that is what I created. And so that taught me, no matter what you do, this is always the most important thing. It all starts up here. That's what created this city, right? That vision of this leader. And so starting again, that's exactly what I did, right? I had to rebuild myself up, which this is why I got into all this stuff, by working on my own mind.
They always say, be careful what you say, because that's going to reflect the true reality.
Exactly. Language is the gateway to the subconscious. So whatever we say, somebody's speaking poorly about themselves or somebody else or some kind of fear, that's what's actually going on inside of them. So the quickest way that you can change is just to become aware of how you speak, because what you speak is what you create into existence. I don't know about the Quran because I haven't delved into it as much yet. I'm learning from my dad though, who's Muslim. But in the Bible, it first says, it started with the word. First, it was the word. God spoke things into existence, and we all have that power to speak things into existence.
In the Quran, there was the first verse of the Quran, Iqra, read. That was the first thing that ever came to Prophet Muhammad. So yeah, you can definitely get to learn more on that. I'll share with you some places if you're very interested.
I love that.
Where could people reach out to you?
Just online, Instagram, Ibrahim. They can.
Well, how would you spell it out? Your username?
Ebrahim.
Underscore, I think, or it was just Ibrahim?
Yeah, just
Ibrahim. All right. Well, Ibrahim, thank you for being here. Really, I think the audience learned so much about personal belief and limiting those beliefs, for sure. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.